here. We know we've got 8 families in a 9-mile stretch. That's fantastic news. There's not that anywhere here. A gentleman by the name of Henry de Lange was on the phone. And that's it. It's like a good years ago.
Okay, thanks for tuning in. Would like to take the time today to talk a little bit about this very good book by Catherine de Lange. It's called Brain Power. This book will help you to optimize your cognitive ability. It will help you to make better use of the most important organ that you have, that we all have, which is our brain. What I really love about the book is that she talks about how, because the brain is incredibly complex, it's not clear nor obvious what is good and what is bad. We hear so many different conflicting reports, recommendations, findings, studies. Some scientists, for example, say that coffee is bad. Some say coffee can actually be good. So it's hard to make sense of so many different opinions, and this is mostly due to the complexity of the brain. So if we do one particular thing, let's say we increase our caffeine intake, we drink a cup of coffee in the morning, some scientists would argue that this can reduce blood flow to the brain and is not good for you in the long term. Others might point to the fact that it can actually improve our lives if we're more sharp in the morning, if we have clearer vision, if we're more able because we have a better picture of what's in front of us. Many people, for example, drink coffee in the morning to make themselves more alert, to keep themselves awake and to get rid of the fogginess. I myself drink coffee in the morning for this reason. I can struggle to focus and concentrate without, a cup of coffee in the morning. So it's hard to make sense of what actually is true. And I really like the fact that she talks about this in the book, that there's always pros, there's always cons, there's always positive aspects and negative aspects. So increasing A might have a result X, but result X might cause B, which then lowers X, which has a knock-on effect to something else, which then can change something else, can actually make you more stressed, release cortisol, release adrenaline, cause aging. So what you have to bear in mind is that there's no one shoe size fits all. Every individual is different, everyone has a different brain, and the brain is complex because everyone's situation is different. So it's been shown that the environment we find ourselves in triggers or activates certain combinations of genes within our DNA, and this can cause us to behave in different ways. So what I really got from the book was not necessarily what should we do, what things are recommended, but the biggest take I got was what should we avoid? Because there are some things which there's almost unanimous, ubiquitous support from by scientists. There are some things are not really disputed, and by focusing on a number of key aspects and trying to improve how we perform them, how to optimize them. So the first chapter is all about diet, and we hear so many different things about what's good for us, what's bad for us. She seems to suggest that the more natural, the better. So if our diets contain fruit and vegetables, nuts, these things are very good for us. She kind of recommends the Mediterranean diet, and she points to studies, large-scale studies, and does so throughout the book to support what she is saying. One of the impressive things about the book is that clearly she has spent many years researching all of the different aspects of the book, including diet. She talks about the gut and the bacteria. There's something like 20 trillion bacteria living inside our guts, inside the large intestine. There's a very large number of different bacteria. And we don't really know what's going on in terms of the interplay between all of the different bacteria, because the numbers are astronomical in terms of the different byproducts, byproducts of byproducts of byproducts of byproducts. But what we do know is that it's been kind of underestimated how important the gut is. I think it's true that something like 50% of dopamine is synthesized inside the large intestine. So what goes on inside our digestive system has a significant impact on the neurochemicals that we are producing. And of course, this has a large impact on our moods and our behavior. So diet is clearly very important, and she recommends keeping things as natural as possible and sticking to Mediterranean diet where possible. She, hardly surprisingly, says that we should definitely avoid some things. The most obvious examples are fizzy drinks, particularly the energy drinks. I have to say I never drink energy drinks. A can of whatever it happens to be, containing perhaps 20 teaspoons of sugar, plus the caffeine, plus other things that they add to them. That is no way suitable for a human body which has evolved over millions of years to survive in an environment like the one you can see behind me, in forests. We would have eaten fruits, taken the fruit from the tree, caught fish, caught wild animals, but consuming that much sugar and that many different processed elements as well, clearly that's not going to be optimal for how your body has evolved to digest and use energy that comes in. So clearly that can be ruled out. All sugary drinks, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, long-term use of these drinks, heavy use of the drinks, going to have net adverse effects, not least with regards to tangible, more obvious ailments like diabetes. She spends quite a bit of time talking about that condition. So another thing that she talks about is that, going back to the idea of keeping things natural, she suggests or contemplates the idea that intermittent eating might actually be better for us, and that through evolution we didn't really evolve to have breakfast in the morning and then lunch in the afternoon and then dinner before going to bed. It was more likely that our food was much less predictable. We'd go days without eating, and then we'd have a big meal, and then maybe a few more days, and so on. And so this might actually be more better for our physical well-being and therefore our mental well-being. All of the different things are tied. They're all related when it comes to the body. And she does make this point clearly in the book as well. She talks about how fasting, because it might be more natural in terms of how the body evolved, has some beneficial effects. For example, it's been shown that fasting can actually improve our sharpness and our focus, as well as the strength of our different senses. And this has the evolutionary explanation, in that if the body is starving, it's going to be important for the body to become more able to hunt for food. So quite interesting that she talks about all of these things. That's what chapter 1 is about. It's about diet. She then, in chapter 2, moves on to sleep. She talks about the importance of sleep, and how it's probably underestimated generally how important sleep is. It's recommended roughly 7 to 8 hours, and she kind of talks about how that would be a good amount of sleep to get. Interestingly, she said in this chapter that, just waiting for the winds to die down a little bit. But tiredness can have a very detrimental effect on our cognition, on our ability to think. She kind of suggests that if we were to not sleep at all and then drive, the potential risk is greater than slightly exceeding the drink limits, the alcohol limits. This is how detrimental it can be to sleep. It can be to drive without sleep the night before. And I'm sure, we're all aware of this. When you go to school or when you go to work and you're tired, it's very difficult to actually get anything done, get anything meaningful, difficult, that's going to require a lot of calories, problem solving, abstract thoughts, especially anything creative. It's difficult to do if your brain is simply fatigued through lack of sleep. She talks about how this, in different countries, they have different number of hours of sleep, suggesting that Japan has slightly fewer on average than other countries. She talks about different types of sleep as well. So there's deep sleep. I forget the name of it. REM. It's a deep kind of sleep, and there's kind of a shallower type of sleep. And the deep sleep is especially important because this helps to kill plaque in our brains. She talks about how we can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's and dementia in later life. And having deep sleep enables our immune system to get to work and to kill anything harmful that's maybe floating around in our brain, which over time could build up and increase the chances of Alzheimer's. In fact, because the way I think she's conceptualized this book is that on the one hand, it's about getting the most out of your brain. It's called brain power. But the opposite of that is when we can harm our ability to think and our brain health. So in talking about Alzheimer's, things which contribute or lead to a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's are going to be the opposite things to do in terms of maintaining brain health. So it's related. But she gives a number of factors. Let me just find where she talks about this, because this is a really interesting part of the book. So here you can see the different cycles of sleep that she talks about, and there are quite a few diagrams in here. I'll just read this for you. So, how much sleep? How much sleep should you get if you want to try to protect your brain from dementia? One large study from 2020 pulled together over 28,000 people taking part in long-term research projects in England and China, and looked at how much people slept and their cognitive decline during the follow-up period, which amounted to 100,000 years between them. They discovered a U-shaped curve, which is to say that people with extreme sleep habits, less than 4 hours a night or more than 10, had the most cognitive decline in the follow-up period. The effects were especially strong for memory, leading the authors to conclude that cognitive function should be monitored in individuals with insufficient or excessive sleep. So it seems like there's a Goldilocks, and in most things there's a Goldilocks. There's a danger of having too much sleep, and there's a danger of having not enough sleep. But just to find what I was trying to get at with the Alzheimer's, because if one can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, they would probably be doing things which are good for their brain. So let me find that. Okay, So the 10 best things you can do to reduce your risk of dementia now. Not smoke. Again, we're not talking rocket science here. It's pretty foolish to smoke. Find work or hobbies that challenge your brain. So giving yourself puzzles, giving yourself problems to solve, things to think about. This keeps you sharp, because in some ways the brain acts like a muscle, and the more you use it, the sharper, the more effective it is. Take regular exercise. She spends the whole of chapter 3 talking about physical exercise and how important it is to get out and walk around, run regularly, exercise every day, because the brain is quite calorie, it needs a lot of calories. It takes around 20% of the total calories that our body consumes, and requires a lot of oxygen. And running dramatically increases the oxygen flowing to the brain, and this keeps it in good repair. Socialise often. There is, she talks about how loneliness, particularly in elderly, can have a detrimental impact on our mental health, can cause stress, isolation. These factors are related as well, because if someone just lives by themselves and they're not getting out of the house and talking to people, they're not also benefiting from the cognitive aspect, because being around people, you have to actually listen to what they're saying, think about what they're saying, respond to it. So the combination of the two, the absence of the two things, socializing and having some work to keep your mind occupied, to keep your mind busy, it's going to have a large impact on your cognitive functioning. Reduce alcohol consumption. I have to say, from personal experience, I haven't drunk any alcohol since the start of the year, and definitely much sharper. Judgments is much clearer, decision making much faster. I can think things through much more quickly. So definitely benefiting from no alcohol. Keep blood pressure low, keeping your stress low. She does mention later on in the book that some stress is actually good for us. Again, playing with the idea of natural environments, it's quite natural for us to be stressed on occasion throughout evolutionary history. So, predator on the horizon, not knowing where to go, hunger. Our bodies are designed to experience stress, and so it can actually have some benefits for us, as long as it's not high stress over an extended period of time, because what happens when you're stressed is that your immune system is suppressed, is not working optimally, and this has large ramifications on the general health of your body. This is why stress causes aging, because your immune system is not as able to get rid of toxins, get rid of things which can make us ill. That's why during exam season, lots of students in schools across the country, they all come in with runny nose, sore throats, feeling tired and ill, because the stress of the exams also dampens the immune system and its ability to cope with infection. So that's quite important. This one's obvious: avoid head injuries. Don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but things like boxing, UFC, is this really sensible? You can have your own opinion on that, your own what you think of that, but constant impact to the head, how could that possibly not have some negative ramifications? Should also be mentioned that the most important organ we have is the brain inside our heads. Purely from a selfish point of view, is that your happiness occurs in your brain, your experience, your consciousness. What you see, your sense of self is all occurring in your brain. So even if you don't really care about the cognitive aspect, you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't need to be ultra sharp. You know, I'm not the CEO of a top company. You know, I don't need to be making £1 million deals every 10 seconds on the phone. But you should want to be happy. And in some sense, we don't really have a choice. You know, and if you can even just consider maybe 30% of what she's written in this book and apply some of it in little ways, you know, the effects could be enormous, particularly over a long period of time. Just making like tiny little changes. There's a great book I've been meaning to read for a long time called Atomic Habits, and someone was telling me about it, and that book is all about making tiny little changes, 1% improvements every day, and the compound accumulative effect of that can be colossal. So she talks about people with hearing loss and who don't wear hearing aids. They've almost got double the chance of dementia or Alzheimer's. Seems that sound coming in to the ears stimulates the various processes of the brain and keeps it active, and the absence of that can contribute to degenerative brain conditions. So she talks about how important it is to wear the hearing aid if one does have hearing loss. Eat a healthy diet, we've already spoken about that, and avoid air pollution where possible. Again, and the way these factors can combine, this is a beautiful park. It's out in the country. I love being out here because it's very peaceful. I can just be by myself and think about things, relax, no stress, go for exercise as well. One thing I'm trying to improve is maybe run a little bit more, because I've tended in recent months to just walk around. I want to increase the activity. She has given this beautiful diagram of various forms of exercise and the impacts they can have. So, you know, seems to be larger benefits the more vigorous the exercise. That's what she seems to be suggesting in this book. So it's a very good book, and it's very enjoying to read. It took me around 5 days to get through it. And she's written it in quite a no-nonsense style. She hasn't, because sometimes when you read health-related books, people are extremely careful not to be too clear with what they've said, but to suggest and kind of soften the edges. But she's been quite assertive in some of her recommendations. But she only does so where there's obvious and there's a large body of data and evidence to back up her points. And then she talks about thealthy body, healthy mind. She talks about inflammation and how inflammation can mess with your mind. That's what she's written here. There's an interesting chapter about how taking care of your teeth can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's, suggesting that gum disease, the bacteria can get into the blood, and then it can get into the brain and cause havoc with the functioning of the brain. Quite fascinating that she spoke about this particular specific study. How to form healthy habits. She talks about light as well, and like, for example, the way this book might be helpful or useful is that in knowing about the importance of sleep, you can make like a little change to your sleeping arrangements. So just turning off the lights maybe 30 minutes or turning them down before sleep can have a huge impact. Because again, going back to evolution, the way our body can tell if it's night or day, which is very important to the circadian cycle and to our ability to sleep, the release of melatonin is related. It's linked to whether or not we believe it to be night or day. And the light comes in through the eyes, because for millions of years there was no artificial light. It was all from the sun. So your brain has evolved to feel sleepy when it's dark and more awake when it's light. So when you have the lights turned on at like 10 p.m. or you're playing a video game or you're on the phone, your brain is thinking, okay, it's daytime. So you don't produce the melatonin that's going to help you drift to sleep. So little things just like turning down the lights or turning off the lights could mean you get an extra 30 minutes of sleep a day. That could turn into, 2 hours per week. And you might notice there'll be knock-on effects. You'll go to work, you'll feel a little bit fresher, your mood will be a bit brighter, and your interactions with others, you make them feel better about themselves, because if someone's tired and miserable and down in the dumps and their body language, doesn't radiate warmth and lights and energy, people are not necessarily going to want to be around that person. So these little things can make a big difference to your life, and that's just one example of how you can apply this, because it's like most things, the real value is in what's applied. It's in how this knowledge is used in the real world to actually make a difference to your life, to your ability to be productive, and for you to feel happy, and making the most out of your brain, so that you're better able to help other people in whatever capacity and in whatever role that happens to be. So I'll leave this book with you. Very good book. If you haven't read any books on neuroscience or the brain, I have to say in school we did have some lessons on the brain, but they weren't particularly useful. We were never taught about the general shape of the brain and the evolutionary history of it, and just the main parts. Sometimes the way to teach something is to just give an overview, like a big map. Okay, this is the spinal cord and the cerebellum. This is the primary, most basic part of the brain that's used for movement. And then you have the midbrain, which is important for emotions and processing threats from the environment. When we look around, light comes into the eyes. First of all, it goes through the midbrain, and if we detect a threat, amygdala starts becoming excited, and then we start to produce adrenaline, we get stressed, and cortisol is released into the body as well. And then, something so basic in school, nobody said, okay, this is where all the high-level thinking takes place. The frontal lobe. It literally is at the front of your skull, and that is where abstract reasoning, high-level, intense, concentrated, focused, type 2 thinking, as Daniel Kahneman talked about in his wonderful book, Thinking Fast, Slow. Thinking Fast and Slow, or I think it was Thinking Fast, Slow, but wonderful book. So check this book out for yourself. You can pick it up on Amazon. I think I got it from W.H. Smith, but won't take you long to get through it, and can make a real difference to your life. Thanks for watching.